Okay, hi everyone. On the left side of my screen, I have Claude desktop that is configured to use VaultKit over MCP. And then on the right side of my screen, you can see my terminal there, which I'm going to be using to interact with VaultKit. So I'm going to be running some commands there. Okay, so before I, instead of jumping right into slides and sharing the slides, I'll just show you how an AI agent actually can interact with the production data. Okay, so we're gonna be asking Claude a very simple business question, and then we're gonna wait and see what happens. So I already have the question written down here on my screen, as you can see here. So I'm saying I'm asking which of our customers have ordered our product the most, list them by their full names and phone numbers. Okay, so gonna go ahead and send, and then we'll wait and see what happens. Okay, so Claude is thinking right now, so it's trying to query VaultKit. It's sending the query through VaultKit, as you can see. Okay. All right, so Claude has, given us the result here. So it's saying that order counts by the order dataset puts customer ID 1 on top with 4 orders, followed by customer ID 2, 3, and 4 tied at 3 orders each. Everyone else has 1 to 2 orders. Okay, so it was able to identify which of our customers that had the most orders. But if you see here, it's saying that it's trying to pull their names and phone numbers, but it requires approval, since it combines PII and that request is still pending. Okay, so this request has entered into a pending state with the request ID as this. So before I go ahead and approve this request, so I'm gonna pause here to kind of explain, to clarify, some things because they're very important. So VaultKit did not decide that this request needs approval or needed an approval. All right, so before now, I already defined a policy that says request for production PII requires human approval. So VaultKit is not making any sort of like governance decisions here on its own. It's simply enforcing, the policy that the organization has already written. In this case, I am the organization. So yeah, so I'll just go ahead and approve this request, and then we'll now like see what happens, when I approve that, and then go from there. So I'm gonna use the command for approval. First thing I'm gonna check is to see all of the requests that is in the approval queue. So I'm gonna check this right now. So I can see there are 2 pending requests here, but I believe the latest one, which is 156, the ID 156 is the one I just requested right now. So and this, as you can see, I can see like the data set is customers, and these are the fields that it is trying to retrieve, or the data is trying to retrieve. Okay, so as a reviewer, right here I can see everything I need as a reviewer to be able to decide what to do here, whether to approve or to deny. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm just gonna go ahead and approve this request. So I would say VKit approval, approve, and then the ID 156. Okay, so it's saying approved, and then issuing the expiration, and then the grant reference. Okay, so now I want to pause here also to explain, what the grant you are seeing here actually is, and why we have the grant, because the grant is essentially what VaultKit is all about. All right, so most people actually assume that VaultKit is another AI gateway or another MCP middleware or something that basically sits in front of tools, deciding which tools to call, which action the agent is allowed to take, and all of that. So that is not what VaultKit is actually. So VaultKit doesn't govern agents, right? VaultKit governs data, and the mechanism it uses to do that is the grant, which we are seeing here that the grant that was issued here is the mechanism that is using to do all of that. So the grant essentially is the authorization object. It's kind of represents exactly what data is allowed to leave the database. So who requested it, which policy approved it, how long it's valid for, whether it requires approval, and whether it can be reused. It's also fingerprinted. The grant is fingerprinted, meaning that it's tamper-proof, and then you can review it, you can revoke a grant. It also expires, as you can see the expiration time that we see here. So after a certain time, it expires. So everything about VaultKit revolves around this object. Okay, so the grant is just a representation of the data, the maximum allowed data that the actor is allowed to access in this particular point in time. Okay, so why this is different from most of the AI governance tools and softwares you see out there is most authorization system actually kind of answer yes or no question. Can this actor access this resource? This can this actor or can this agent call this tool, yes or no? All right, but VaultKit answers a different type of question. So exactly what data is this requester allowed to receive right now? So this is a very different model. The database doesn't execute the agent's request. It executes basically what the grant authorizes. So the distinction is important because it means that VaultKit isn't simply watching what the agent is doing, right? So what VaultKit is doing is that it's determining, the data that is allowed to leave the database before anything is returned, before one byte of data leaves the database. Okay, so just wanted to make that distinction and also clarify things than what the grant is all about. So now that the request is approved here, so if I ask Claude to check status of the request and show me results if approved. So we're gonna wait here. Okay. So yeah, so what is happening here is that the request got approved, but the return names and phone numbers are all maxed. So everything is maxed. So Claude is not able to show any meaningful information because all of the data returned maxed. And I wanted to explain that as well. Okay, so the agent kind of asked for names and phone numbers, and the response doesn't really contain, the raw sensitive values, that the agent requested. They're all maxed, right? So this is because my policy says, I said that earlier, the policy says that production PII must always be redacted. So VaultKit enforced that policy before the data even left the database. Okay, so the database never returned any form of raw values to the agent. The agent never saw it at any point. So to me, that's like the different or the important differentiation there. Okay, so many governance system will tell you the agent accessed an SSN. They're gonna kind of log all of those information. But VaultKit makes sure that the SSN never at any point leaves the data store in the first place. So, VaultKit is not an afterthought. It's not reactive. VaultKit is proactive. Okay, so I'm gonna explain the two layers of control that happened here. So the grant essentially does two things, or did two things there. First, is the data set can can this actor be able to access, this data set, access everything? So secondly, when the access is allowed, when this actor is allowed to access this whole data set, this entire data set, which of the fields within that data set can be returned, and how are they being returned? So I needed to mention that. So some fields might be completely excluded. Some might require approval. Some might be maxed. Some might even like return full. So all of that is determined by the policy I wrote, and then those policies are enforced through the grants that we have here. So this is I just wanted to use this demo to kind of explain what VaultKit is and what it isn't. And so this is the human approval layer of VaultKit. Other than that, I can also, if I ask this question again, same question, sorry, I'm gonna pull this first one here. So if I ask again exactly the same question and then I send, okay, so if you notice, there are no so basically the results, the same result as before was returned. If you notice, there are no what would I say, what is the word here, there are no approval this time. There is no approval phase where I have to go and approve. So VaultKit recognizes that this request matches an existing valid grant, right? So it simply reuses it. It doesn't kind of initiate another fresh request. It reuses the grant as long as the grant is still valid and has not expired yet. Okay, so that's important because approvals aren't tied to conversations, right? So they are tied to approved data access. Okay, so if I ask a different type of question, if I change the shape of my question here and I say list them by full names, phone numbers, and emails, and sign up sources. I'm gonna remove the extra and here, emails and sign up sources, and I send. Now the data shape is different because I'm asking for more things. So there are categorically two different types of requests. So let's see what happens. So if you notice, VaultKit is saying, Claude is saying this request has triggered another approval again. So because the request has changed, the shape of the request has changed. I've added extra things. I've added extra fields in the request. So it has triggered another approval phase. So what I'm gonna do right now is that I'm gonna go ahead and approve that again on my terminal. So instead of 156, I'm gonna change this to 57, and then I'm gonna send. So the request is also approved. Another grant is issued for this exact data set, and then the expiration is here. So Claude is asking, want me to check the approval again now or wait? So I'm gonna say check approval again. So it's approved. Okay, so VaultKit already returned the data. So as you can see, the PII information are still maxed. You can see the sign up sources that I included. So as you can see, the PII information and the sensitive information are still maxed, which is what our policy says, that no access to, no sensitive data should be returned in production. So existing AI governance product, generally focuses on controlling what an agent can do or record, or what happened afterwards. It's like a reaction, right? So VaultKit focuses on something different. Okay, so it governs what data is actually allowed to leave the production system. The grant I just shared is the primitive that makes that possible. So every request becomes an approved, reviewable, reusable authorization for a specific shape of data. So that's the core idea behind VaultKit. And yeah, thanks for just watching.